Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt TV. My name is Stefan Bienkowski and once again joined by my colleagues Euan and Ben. And today we are talking about the big Premier League market value update. Hundreds of players across the top division have had their market values increased or decreased, but today we're specifically talking about the biggest winners from the update. The top 10 list of the players who have gained the biggest market value since our last update. More or less looking at which players have improved the most in the top flight. And Ben, when we take a look at that top 10, there's obviously a number of players there, but perhaps we should kick things off with both Saka at Arsenal, Bukayo Saka, and Phil Foden at Manchester City, because they've both had big upgrades and they're now both kind of neck and neck near the top of the list, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it was one of the standout points from the Premier League market value update, and it's a debate that's sort of raged on for the last couple of seasons now, with many people comparing Saka and Foden, who's better. It's sort of like a scaled down Messi and Ronaldo in the Premier League. It's a constant debate, who's the better player out of the two of them, who should be worth more. They're now both 130 million, which makes them the joint fifth most valuable players in world football. Only Haaland, Bellingham, Mbappe and Vinicius Jr. are worth more. Foden sees a 20 million increase, while Saka only gets a 10. In terms of raw statistics this season, Saka is actually better looking at goals and assists. But looking at the eye test and some of his performances in big games, the Manchester derby last month springs to mind. Foden's been magnificent this season, playing in a more central role. He's been one of the key performers for a Man City team that could go on to achieve the double treble. Yeah, the double treble would be the first time in history. Firing on all fronts again, and they're both worth 130 million euros now. 20 million increase for Foden and 10 million increase for Saka. Another standout point from the update was Ivan Toney, getting a 15 million increase to 50 million. Leaves him below Ollie Watkins, but can you tell us, Stefan, a bit more about Ivan Toney's market value increase?
Yeah, he's probably one of the most interesting ones across all of Transfermarkt this season, obviously because he had his ban due to the gambling issues that he had at Brentford, and he missed a huge amount of football. But despite that, he was kind of the topic of so much interest in the January transfer window when that ban came to an end. And we kind of had to take that all into account. Obviously, on the one hand, he's a young striker, well, youngish rather, probably still edging towards his peak, scoring goals for fun in the Premier League. Scoring goals for a team in Brentford who, mid-table towards lower bottom half of the table, a player that I think a lot of big clubs would love to have. So obviously that pushes his market value up. But we also had to consider the fact that the market for players going for 100 million euros, particularly strikers, is perhaps not as hot as the transfer window would have us believe, or the rumour mill would have us believe. You read all these stories about Osimhen or Lautaro Martinez or Mbappe. I mean, obviously Mbappe will probably end up going, but that's largely because of his contract situation. So when it came to Toney, I think we thought, he obviously has to go up in value, and he has gone up by 15 million euros to a very respectable 50 million. But I think it'd be really interesting to see what happens in the summer as to whether he does move on, and if he does so, how much clubs are actually allowed to pay for him, because he's been quite open about the idea of moving. In fact, I think I saw this morning that he likened himself to a move to Real Madrid this summer. I'm not quite sure if he's been reading the newspapers, because I think they've got another striker in mind. But that's kind of a good example of how we do kind of try to deal with the market values, because we obviously have to take form into account. We have to take wider market trends into account. How much these guys or guys of that similar age, talent, strike position, how much they all tend to go for in the market, the transfer window. And yeah, we kind of landed on that value for Toney, which is quite interesting. And I think the other thing as well that's also to bear in mind is that young players in particular do tend to go for much more. Toney's 28, but if we actually look elsewhere around that top 10, and this actually may be a good place for you to jump in, because some people might actually be quite surprised to see not one but two Man United players on that list, despite the fact that, yes, of course, Man United have just had a big win in the FA Cup, and we will talk about that this week, but by and large in the Premier League, they've been kind of hot and cold, but it would seem as though Ten Hag's doing something right.
Yeah, probably mainly cold and hot, certainly in the league this season for Manchester United. But one silver lining of the season is Ten Hag's implementing these young players into first team regulars and potential, I think, superstars, both of them. Although Garnacho's only valued at 40 million, he's had a 10 million increase. If he was to get sold on the market, it would be for far in excess of that total. Obviously, the biggest winner in the market value update was Kobe Mainoo, who's jumped by 29 million to 35 million, which is a real sign of probably two things: that how quickly he's burst onto the scene and got everybody talking about him. Obviously, if you play for Manchester United, you're going to have an incredible spotlight on you, but he seems to be quite often the calmest man on the pitch. It doesn't seem to faze him at all. He plays with a ridiculous maturity for his age as well, and looks like an incredible prospect. I was actually very surprised that he's not in the England squad, certainly for the upcoming friendlies, but even going into the summer, I think Gareth Southgate's got to seriously look at him, because I don't think England really have a player of his skill set in their squad at the moment. I think they've got two, I'd argue, two world-class midfield players in Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham, but that kind of third position's up for grabs. And if you look at the options in there, Jordan Henderson, he's not doing great out in Ajax. And Calvin Phillips is not in the squad. Conor Gallagher, I don't think he's as good a player as Kobe Mainoo, as well as he's played for Chelsea this season. So, does Mainoo make the plane to Germany this summer for England?
You've also got Trent Alexander-Arnold that could play in that midfield as well, for Southgate.
Yeah, who's injured at the moment, he won't be in the squad. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Trent Alexander-Arnold, actually, because Conor Bradley was obviously one of the big winners from that one as well. He's gone up from 2 million to 15 million euros, which, obviously I'm sure there'll be Liverpool fans saying you wouldn't even get one of his right leg for that much money. But even looking ahead to the summer, whether it's Foden or Saka or obviously Kobe Mainoo if he does break into the team, Conor Bradley, Ben, is obviously a player who, the way he's played for Liverpool this season, it feels like the sky's the limit for him, doesn't it? And that market value looks like it could just continue rising further and further, especially if he does manage to kind of dislodge Trent Alexander-Arnold from that right-back position, either through form or because Alexander-Arnold does move into midfield.
Yeah, I think the biggest compliment you can give Conor Bradley is the fact that Trent Alexander-Arnold, for me, the best certainly attacking right-back in the world, has come out of the team and it's not really affected Liverpool. And you've got a youth player going into that position. He's been fantastic. Obviously, like you said, some Liverpool fans would have perhaps expected a bigger rise, but we've obviously got to be keen to not be reactionary. It's only a very small sample size we've seen from Conor Bradley so far. It's only sort of 10 or 15 games he's played. We've seen other players in the past play that and then really drop off. But Conor Bradley's making some amazing progress, as of some of the other youth players coming into the Liverpool team this season that have kept their season on track, really. But yeah, definitely looks like one for the future. And like you mentioned, it could possibly open up that possibility for Trent to move into a central area and then play Conor Bradley as a more orthodox right back.